When we talk about rewiring your mind, the foundation of everything lies in understanding one critical fact. Your brain is not a fixed organ. For decades, people believe that once you reach adulthood, your brain's wiring is set in stone, unchangeable, rigid, predetermined. But modern neuroscience tells a very different story. The brain is remarkably plastic. This means it has the capacity to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. This ability to adapt, to grow, to literally rewire is called neuroplasticity. This concept that your brain can change is both empowering and humbling. It tells you that the limitations you believe you have today, the habits that seem hardwired, the automatic reactions you feel trapped in, they are not permanent. They are the product of past experiences, repeated behaviors, and the focus of your attention. And because the brain is plastic, those experiences and behaviors are continuously shaping the architecture of your neural circuits. Let's break that down a little. Every time you learn something new, whether it's a skill like playing an instrument, a language, or even changing the way you respond emotionally to a stressor, you're engaging neuroplasticity. The brain physically changes. It grows new synapses, those are the connections between neurons, and strengthens certain pathways while pruning away others that are less used. This process is very much like forging a path in a forest. The more you walk a particular trail, the clearer and easier that trail becomes to follow. Neglected trails, on the other hand, become overgrown and fade away. What this means is that your thoughts and actions are powerful. They sculpt your brain. And the repetitive nature of these actions is key. It's not about one-off moments or random acts of willpower. It's about consistent, deliberate practice. This principle is why habits, whether good or bad, become so deeply embedded, because they literally build and reinforce specific neural pathways. But here's the critical insight. This plasticity never shuts off. It doesn't just happen when you're a kid or when you're learning something new in school. Your brain remains adaptable throughout your entire life. This adaptability is the cornerstone of transformation. No matter what your past looks like, no matter what mental patterns or behaviors you've developed over years or decades, there is always potential to change, to grow, and to rewire. Now, you might be wondering, if the brain can change, why do we feel stuck sometimes? Why does it seem like breaking old habits or thought patterns is so difficult? The answer lies in how deeply those neural pathways have been established. The more you have repeated certain behaviors or ways of thinking, the stronger those circuits become. It's like those well-worn paths in the forest that are easy to follow, that makes it feel natural to stay in your current mindset. It also means that changing requires intentional effort. You have to start forging new trails. At first, these new pathways are weak, unclear, and uncomfortable to use, but with repetition, they strengthen and become the new norm. This is where understanding the mechanisms of neuroplasticity becomes essential. You don't just need to want change, you need to act in a way that supports your brain's natural learning processes. That means focusing your attention on what you want to change, practicing the new behavior repeatedly, and engaging in activities that promote brain growth, like physical exercise, sufficient sleep, and periods of rest for memory consolidation. It also means that you have to be patient and consistent. Neuroplasticity is powerful, but it isn't instantaneous. Your brain isn't a switch you flip on and off. Instead, it's a process, a gradual transformation. Small daily actions, repeated over time, build the new architecture of your mind. One of the most important factors in this process is focus. Where your attention goes, neural energy flows. When you consciously focus on new ways of thinking or behaving, your brain dedicates resources to strengthening those pathways. Conversely, if you continuously give attention to negative patterns or self-doubt, you're reinforcing those circuits. This brings us to an empowering truth. You are not a passive passenger in your brain's wiring. You are an active participant in its shaping. When you choose to engage with the process of rewiring your mind, you are harnessing your brain's innate capacity for change. You are effectively training your brain to support a better version of yourself. Consider this. Learning a new habit or a new way of thinking initially requires more cognitive effort because you're activating weaker, less established neural connections. but with time, those connections become stronger, more efficient, and less effortful to use. What once felt difficult eventually becomes automatic. That is the essence of rewiring. This process has profound implications not only for individual change, but for how we approach mental health, performance, and well-being. When you understand that your brain is a living, growing organ capable of transformation, it changes how you approach challenges. Obstacles are no longer roadblocks, they become opportunities to rewire and grow. The journey of rewiring your mind begins with acknowledging this plasticity. It starts with a commitment to consistent, focused action. It requires an understanding that change is a process and that each repetition, each moment of focused attention builds the new you. So as you embark on this process, remember, your brain is not fixed. Your mind is not fixed. Every thought you focus on, every habit you repeat is shaping your neural circuits. And with time and effort, those circuits will shape you, your mindset, your behaviors, and ultimately your life. This is the power of neuroplasticity. This is the power you hold, the power to rewire your mind. When we hear the word stress, it often triggers a negative reaction. Stress is commonly associated with overwhelm, anxiety, or burnout, but this perspective misses a crucial point. Stress, in its proper form and dosage, is actually one of the most powerful tools your brain and body have for growth and rewiring. Stress itself is neither good nor bad. It's how you engage with it that determines whether it becomes a source of resilience or a source of breakdown. To understand this, we need to look at what stress really is. Stress is a biological response, a cascade of signals your nervous system sends when it perceives a challenge or threat. This response activates your body's alert systems, releasing hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that sharpen your senses, increase your heart rate, and prepare you to either face the challenge or escape it. This reaction is ancient, rooted deeply in survival mechanisms that have allowed humans to respond rapidly to danger. But in the modern world, where threats are often psychological or emotional rather than physical, our stress response can sometimes feel like a double-edged sword. However, the key insight here is that stress, when controlled and managed, triggers adaptation. This is the principle of hormesis, where a low or moderate dose of stress makes an organism stronger. Think about how muscles grow. They only do so when exposed to controlled stress through exercise. The same goes for your brain. Stress, when experienced in manageable bursts, pushes your nervous system out of its comfort zone and forces it to adapt. This adaptation is part of the rewiring process. When you expose yourself to stressors that are challenging but not overwhelming, your brain learns to handle them more efficiently over time. This builds resilience. The neural circuits that manage stress and emotional regulation become stronger and more flexible. Your mind becomes better equipped to deal with uncertainty, discomfort, and pressure. This is not a theoretical claim, it's a biological fact. This means that if you want to rewire your mind, you can't avoid stress altogether. Instead, you have to learn to use it strategically. You have to train your brain to see stress as a signal for growth rather than a sign of failure or defeat. This shift in mindset is foundational because the way you interpret stress affects how your brain responds to it. And when you view stress as harmful or overwhelming, your body releases a flood of stress hormones that can impair cognitive function, increase anxiety, and even damage neural tissue over time. But when you approach stress as a challenge, something that temporarily activates your system to help you grow, your brain activates pathways that promote learning and resilience. In practice, this means that controlled stress exposure can be one of the fastest ways to rewire your brain. Whether it's through physical training, cold exposure, intermittent fasting, intense focus sessions, or even controlled social challenges, you create a neurochemical environment conducive to change. These controlled stressors induce the release of neurotrophic factors, molecules that support the growth and survival of neurons. One of the most studied of these molecules is called BDNF, Brain Descent Neurotrophic Factor, which plays a vital role in neuroplasticity and memory formation. When you regularly engage in controlled stress, your brain doesn't just survive, it thrives. You improve your ability to learn, to adapt, and to regulate your emotions. You become less reactive to everyday stressors because your system has been recalibrated to handle higher levels of challenge without breaking down. Of course, it's important to recognize that not all stress is beneficial. Chronic, unrelenting stress without recovery is harmful. It wears down your system, impairs cognition, disrupts sleep, and undermines immune function. That's why balance is crucial. The stress you expose yourself to must be followed by periods of rest, recovery, and integration. This cycle, stress, recovery, adaptation, is what allows your brain to rewire effectively. An essential part of this process is your control over stress exposure. When you can decide when to engage with a stressor and when to back off, you build what is called stress inoculation. You train your brain to tolerate higher levels of discomfort in a way that is empowering. This sense of agency over your stress response is itself rewiring your mind, creating circuits of confidence and mastery rather than circuits of helplessness and overwhelm. It's also worth mentioning the role of mindset here. The narrative you create about your stress experiences influences your brain's plasticity. Approaching stress with curiosity and a learning mindset rather than fear or avoidance primes your brain for positive change. You literally rewire your neural networks by the way you think about what you are going through. This understanding fundamentally changes how you approach challenges in life. Instead of shrinking from difficulty, you begin to seek it out as an opportunity. You learn to embrace controlled discomfort because it is the gateway to rewiring your brain for greater strength, focus, and emotional regulation. When rewiring your mind, don't aim to eliminate stress, aim to master it. Use it as a tool for transformation. Allow it to push you beyond your current limits, knowing that every controlled challenge you face rewires your brain, making you more resilient and adaptable. The path to a rewired mind is not free from challenge. It is forged through them. And in this lies your power, to harness stress not as an enemy, but as an essential ally in your growth. When we talk about rewiring the mind, one of the most important elements you must understand is that focus is not something you are born with, fixed and unchangeable. Focus is a skill that can be trained, strengthened, and refined over time, much like a muscle. Yet so many people treat focus as if it's a trait you either have or you don't. That misunderstanding keeps countless individuals stuck in cycles of distraction and frustration, believing they just don't have the attention gene. But the truth is much more hopeful. Your ability to concentrate, to engage deeply, and to sustain attention is entirely within your control. It's something you build, and it is a fundamental component of rewiring your brain. At the core of attention is the brain's ability to regulate what it filters in and out. Think of your brain as a spotlight operator at a theater. That spotlight only illuminates a small part of the stage at a time, and the rest remains in darkness. When you focus your attention, you are controlling that spotlight, choosing where to direct your mental energy. But directing that spotlight takes effort and practice. In fact, the neurological circuits responsible for focus are among the most flexible and trainable circuits in your brain. There are several key brain systems involved in focus, but one crucial player is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, decision-making, and self-control. This area acts like the conductor of an orchestra, coordinating your thoughts and actions, suppressing distractions, and sustaining attention on the task at hand. However, this conductor needs practice and proper conditions to perform at its best. Without consistent training, this system can become weak or easily overwhelmed. One of the reasons people struggle with focus is because modern life bombards the brain with constant distractions, notifications, multitasking, rapid task switching. They all fragment your attention and train your brain to expect frequent interruptions. Over time, this can erode your capacity for sustained concentration. But here's the encouraging part. Your brain can relearn how to focus, even if you've spent years in distraction. The process of improving focus begins with understanding that attention is a finite resource. You cannot spread it infinitely thin. When you try to do many things at once, your brain rapidly shifts the spotlight back and forth, but never illuminates anything deeply. This leads to superficial engagement, shallow learning, and often mental fatigue. So to rewire your mind, you have to retrain the brain to sustain the spotlight steadily on one target. This is where deliberate practice becomes essential. Structured, focused periods of work or study, followed by brief rest intervals, allow your brain to exercise its attention muscles. For example, working deeply on a task for 25 to 50 minutes, then taking a 5 to 10 minute break helps maintain optimal attention over time. This rhythm respects your brain's natural cycles of focus and fatigue, making attention sustainable rather than exhausting. And another critical factor is managing the environment. The brain is highly sensitive to sensory input, and minimizing distractions is key to improving focus. This means turning off notifications, setting boundaries. By controlling your environment, you reduce the competing signals that pull your spotlight away from your intended target. But beyond environment and structure, your mindset toward focus matters enormously. Many people approach concentration as a chore or something to be endured. Instead, think of it as a form of mental strength training, an opportunity to build capacity. Like any skill, you will encounter frustration and difficulty at first. Your brain will resist sustained focus because it requires effort and discipline. But with consistent practice, your brain's circuits adapt and become more efficient. Scientific research shows that when you focus on a task deeply, the brain releases chemicals that promote neuroplasticity and learning. Dopamine, for example, plays a role in motivation and reward, reinforcing circuits that help you stay on task. This means that as you train your attention, your brain rewards you for it, making it easier to repeat the behavior over time. Focus becomes not only possible, but increasingly natural. Importantly, this ability to focus also impacts your emotional state. When your attention is scattered, it can lead to feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, and lack of control. Conversely, focused attention brings clarity, calm, and a sense of mastery. This emotional regulation is a direct result of the brain's ability to prioritize relevant information and suppress irrelevant distractions. An other crucial piece to understand is that focus is highly intertwined with your overall state of arousal and alertness. If you're tired, overstimulated, or emotionally dysregulated, your capacity to focus diminishes. This is why regular sleep, physical exercise, and periods of relaxation are foundational to building strong attention. They create the physiological conditions your brain needs to perform at its best. It's also worth noting that focus is a skill that improves with challenge. Just as lifting heavier weights strengthens muscles, gradually increasing the difficulty or duration of your focus exercises enhances your attention circuits. You start with manageable tasks and times, then build upward. This progressive overload helps rewire your brain efficiently. The remarkable takeaway here is that your focus capacity is not a fixed limitation. If you find your mind wandering, if distractions pull you away easily, if you struggle to complete tasks, it doesn't mean you are incapable. It means your brain needs training. And training the skill of focus is one of the fastest ways to rewire your mind toward higher performance, better learning, and greater emotional resilience. Every time you choose to direct your attention deliberately, you're not just getting things done. You're changing the wiring of your brain. You're building stronger, more efficient neural pathways that support clarity, self-control, and purposeful action. And the more you practice, the easier and more automatic this process becomes. Focus is not a trait you were born with. It's a skill you develop. It is a muscle to be trained, a spotlight to be wielded with precision. And mastering this skill unlocks your brain's full potential for change and growth. When we talk about rewiring your mind, one of the most powerful truths to grasp is that your brain is shaped not just by big dramatic moments, but by the small, consistent actions you take every single day. The habits you form, the routines you repeat are the architects of your neural pathways. They build and reinforce the circuits that determine how you think, how you feel, and how you respond to the world. This is because your brain learns and adapts through repetition. Every time you engage in a particular behavior or thought pattern, you strengthen the connections between the neurons involved in that activity. The more you repeat something, the more that pathway becomes myelinated. That means it becomes insulated and faster at transmitting signals. This process is much like building a highway. The first time you travel a path, it's rough and slow, but with every trip, the road smooths out, becomes wider, and the journey becomes quicker and easier. What this means for you is profound. The small habits you cultivate today are literally wiring your brain for your future self. If you develop consistent habits that support focus, discipline, and resilience, you are building a brain that naturally defaults to those states. On the other hand, if your habits support distraction, procrastination, or negativity, you are reinforcing neural circuits that make those states automatic. The key here is consistency. It's not about perfection or about making massive changes overnight. It's about the cumulative effect of small daily actions repeated over time. This is why so many people struggle with change. They look for quick fixes, bursts of motivation, or radical shifts. But the brain doesn't work like that. It responds best to gradual, steady input. This steady repetition rewires the brain slowly but surely, creating lasting transformation. Let's take something as simple as practicing mindfulness or focused breathing for just a few minutes a day. While it might seem minor, this repeated practice strengthens the neural circuits involved in attention regulation and emotional control. Over time, these strengthened pathways help you respond to stress with greater calm and clarity. The same is true for physical exercise, learning new skill, or even consistently choosing to reframe negative thoughts. Each small action lays down the foundation for a new neural architecture. Another important aspect of habit formation is that it leverages the brain's natural tendency to seek efficiency. Once a neural pathway is well established, your brain prefers to use it because it requires less energy than creating new connections on the fly. That's why habits feel automatic. They're your brain's way of conserving resources. This also explains why habits are so hard to break. You're asking your brain to stop using a well-worn highway and build a new one instead. To successfully rewire your mind, you have to harness this mechanism. You must intentionally create new habits that support your goals and then repeat them enough times for those pathways to become dominant. This means that the process of change is less about relying on willpower in the moment and more about designing your life so that the habits you want become the easiest, most automatic choices you make daily. Critical cues play a critical role here. The brain is highly sensitive to context, and your surroundings can trigger habitual behaviors without conscious thought. For example, if you always check your phone the moment you wake up, that environment and routine reinforce that habit loop. To change the habit, you need to change the cues in your environment. Maybe you leave your phone in another room or replace that behavior with a healthier alternative like stretching or journaling. Another piece that often gets overlooked is the role of identity in habit formation. Your brain wants to maintain consistency between your actions and your self-image. If you see yourself as someone who is disciplined, focused, and resilient, you're more likely to engage in habits that align with that identity. Conversely, if you identify as someone who is easily distracted or unmotivated, your brain will reinforce habits that match that narrative. This is why simply deciding who you want to be and acting in accordance with that decision can be a powerful catalyst for rewiring your brain. The process of rewiring through habit is also deeply connected to the brain's reward systems. When you complete a habit that aligns with your goals, your brain releases neurotransmitters like dopamine that signal reward and motivation. These chemical rewards reinforce the new pathway, making you want to repeat the behavior. Over time, this creates a positive feedback loop where the new habit strengthens itself. It is also important to remember that setbacks and failures are part of the process. Habits don't form in a straight line. There will be days when you fall off track, but the key is to return to your habit practice as quickly as possible. The brain's plasticity works best when it receives consistent, repeated signals over time. So every return to your habit after a lapse continues to build your neural pathways. What this means is that you are constantly shaping your brain by what you choose to do each day. You can't control every thought that crosses your mind, but you can control your behaviors and routines. And through those, you shape your brain's wiring. When you realize that the small habits you perform every day are the true architects of your mind, it changes everything. Change is no longer about chasing motivation or willpower. It's about designing and committing to daily actions that build the brain you want to live with. Those actions, repeated over time, rewire your mind to support your goals, your resilience, and your growth. So as you move forward, remember this. Your habits are the highways your brain travels most often. Choose wisely which roads you build and maintain, because those roads will carry you toward the future you create.